This is Auntie Fran with another story from my wonderful gift book of fairy tales. And this story is the story of Rumpelstiltskin. A great many years ago, there lived a miller. He was the owner of a rather dilapidated windmill and the father of a very beautiful daughter. The windmill, despite its age, was in good working order, and the miller managed to provide sufficiently for himself and his daughter with the money he received from grinding the wheat of his neighbors. The miller's daughter, Bella, was quite content to allow her father to do the work. She spent most of her time sitting and watching him without lifting a finger to help. Despite her laziness, the miller was excessively proud of his daughter. To hear him talk, one would think that her face resembled the bloom of a summer rose. Her hair was reportedly to be finer than spun silk, and as for her voice, it was so musical that beside her, a nightingale would need to hide in shame at the poor quality of its singing. Not only did the miller boast about her beauty, but he also had a great deal to say about her many talents. In fact, anything she turned her hand to was done many times better than anyone that had ever done it before. The boastful miller really believed all these things about Bella, and she too was almost convinced that they were true. Anyone who came to the mill was subjected to endless tales about the wonderful daughter of the miller. No one dared to laugh or joke about what was said, for the miller was known for his short temper and strong fists. One day it chanced that the king of that country was out riding with several of his courtiers. While riding, they happened to pass the old mill. Bella was sitting on the doorstep brushing her hair. The king thought that never had he seen a young girl as lovely as this. Dismounting, he led his courtiers toward the mill. The miller, who had been looking out of the window, saw him and took him for a rich merchant or a wealthy lord. Here at last was someone who would appreciate his wonderful daughter. He hurried down the stairs to welcome his guests and invite them to partake of refreshment. The king and his party were tired and thirsty after their long ride, and were happy to accept the miller's hospitality. Bella was sent to fetch food and a jug of ale. The miller was pleased to observe the travelers following his daughter with their eyes. As soon as she was out of the room, he commenced boasting. The visitors had to hear all about her beauty and her many talents. The miller became more and more excited as he spoke. "And best of all," he concluded, "you will never believe this, but my Bella can spin ordinary flax into thread of the purest gold." Flax into gold! No one had ever heard of such a thing being done. The king found it very difficult to believe. He began to think how wealthy he could be if he had a wife who could perform such a marvelous feat. He decided on the spot to marry the girl and take her straight back with him to his palace. The miller was astounded when the king revealed his identity. It was too wonderful that his daughter was to be a real queen. Bella was summoned to hear the good news. She herself found it very difficult to believe that all this was not a dream. The king rose to take his leave, having left instructions with the girl's father about the wedding. Bella was taken to the palace without further ado, as the king wanted to know as soon as possible how she was able to turn flax into gold. The same afternoon, Bella was escorted by the Lord Chamberlain to a small turret room, where a spinning wheel and a pile of flax had been prepared for her. The chamberlain left the poor girl in the locked room with the king's words ringing in her ears. "If by morning you have not succeeded in spinning this flax into gold, you will incur my greatest displeasure." As Bella looked at the flax in dismay, she wondered what her punishment for displeasing the king would be. There was no way to escape from the room, and neither was there a way in which the flax could become gold. Bella sat down and sobbed. Suddenly she jumped up in amazement as she felt a tap on her shoulder. In front of her stood the smallest man that she had ever seen. His clothes were extremely smart, and he sported a fine mustache and a short ginger beard. "Ho, ho," he laughed, and his eyes twinkled. "I surprised you, didn't I?" Bella looked at him timorously and stepped back a little. "You needn't be afraid," he continued. "I have come to help you. I am a man of great power. I am willing to put it at your disposal, but you must give me something in return. I think I would like the silver ring from your finger." "Can you really help me?" begged the girl. "I must spin this flax into gold before morning, and I do not even know how to start." "No sooner said than done," said the little man. "Blink your eyes and look again." Bella did as he instructed. When she opened her eyes, the little man was seated at the spinning wheel, and in front of him a pile of gold thread was getting bigger and bigger as he spun. In no time at all the job was done. Before Bella could thank him, both the little man and the ring from her finger were gone. Bella heard a key being turned in the lock on her door. It opened to admit the king. He looked about in disbelief at the strands of gold thread which lay all over the floor. "That old fool of a miller must have been speaking the truth after all," thought the king. "If she could do it once, she can do it again." His greedy eyes surveyed the gleaming thread. It would look fine made into bolts of cloth of gold to keep in his secret treasure chamber. "Your work has pleased me," he said to the girl. "The thread which you have spun is of good quality, but I think that if the flax were better, the thread could be even richer. I wish you to spin some more. This time the flax will come from my own fields. I expect it to be ready by morning." Bella was taken to a room which was strewn with flax, which looked exactly the same as the flax which the little man had spun for her the night before. She was left alone to begin her work. Of course, all she did was to sit and cry. It was not long before the little man once more made an appearance. This time he demanded the girl's locket and chain in return for spinning the flax into gold. She readily offered it to him, and as before, in no time at all the job was done. Soon after the little man disappeared, the king came to see if the flax had become gold. He praised Bella for her work and told her that if she spent just one more night spinning, then he would marry her with no further delay. Bella had no choice but to follow the king into a third room, where an even greater amount of flax had been left for her to spin. The poor girl knew that if the little man offered to help her again, she would have to send him away, for she had nothing to offer him in payment. As she was thinking about him, the little fellow appeared. "I know that you cannot reward me," he said, "but I shall still help you. Soon you will be a queen, and if one day you should chance to become a mother, I shall take your firstborn child in payment." Bella was ready to agree to anything. She promised her first child to the little man. Soon her flax had been spun into gold, and he was gone. This time the king kept his word. Not long after, he and Bella were married, and a completely new way of life began for the miller's daughter. She had fine clothes and servants to command. Never did she have to lift a finger to do work of any kind. She was as happy as could be. After a year of marriage, she became the mother of a beautiful baby girl. The king called his daughter Adorabella, and she was soon loved by all. One morning, as the queen sat with her daughter on her knee, she heard a little voice which sounded vaguely familiar. "I have come for my payment," it said. She looked around. Sitting on the windowsill was the little man that she had forgotten all about. Surely he could not mean to take the Princess Adorabella. The queen held the child close to her. "Please do not take my baby," she begged. "I will give you money or jewels or anything you wish, if only you will spare my child." The little man looked at the baby. He thought of how he would take her home with him, where she would grow up to be his servant. He thought that he would play a joke on the queen first. "I will spare your daughter," he lied, "if you can guess my name. You will have 3 chances. If you are unable to guess correctly, the child will be forfeit." The queen eagerly consented to this and began to think of names to suit the little man. "Is your name Gingerbeard? Is it Twinkly Eye? Or perhaps is it Thumbkin?" she asked. To each question, her tiny visitor replied with a laugh and a shake of the head. "You have 2 more chances," he said finally, and with a little jump, disappeared. The poor queen spent the next few days trying to think up different names. She announced a competition to her servants for the most unusual name. None of this helped very much, for the next time that the little man appeared, she was unable to give him the right answer. Now she was almost in despair. One of the royal huntsmen heard 2 servants talking about the queen's competition. They were trying to think up the funniest names they had ever heard. "I know a very unusual name," thought the huntsman to himself. "I will tell the queen about the funny little man I saw when I was in the forest." He hurried to the royal chamber, where he was received immediately by the queen herself, who by now was almost out of her mind with worry. The huntsman bowed low and began to speak. "Your Majesty, when I heard about your competition, I decided to come at once. I have a very good name for you. I will tell you how I came to hear of it. Last week, while I was walking through the forest, following the tracks of a deer, I thought I heard a voice singing, and I tried to see where it was coming from. All of a sudden, I saw a small clearing. In the center was a small fire. Dancing around it and singing gleefully to himself was the oddest little person I have ever seen. His clothes were brightly colored, and he had a little pointed beard. He did not see me, but I shall never forget him. I think I can remember the words he was singing. They sounded something like this. At this point, the huntsman cleared his throat and began to sing in a funny, croaking voice. Dance and sing and jump for glee. No one knows my name but me. Little Rex, my royal dame. Rumpelstiltskin is my name. As the huntsman performed the song, the queen wrote down the words. Now she knew that she would be able to outwit the cocky little man. Several days later, he made what he said was his final appearance. The queen tried some of the names which her servants had suggested to her. After shaking his head to each one, her unwelcome visitor danced nearer and nearer to the baby. Finally, he tried to snatch the princess from her cot. Now she is mine, he shouted in triumph, which soon turned to rage as the queen said, Wait, is your name Rumpelstiltskin? The little man shouted and stamped his feet as he slowly became red and then purple in the face. Then, with a great howl of rage, he quite disappeared, never to be seen again. No one could have been happier than the queen when Rumpelstiltskin disappeared. At last, her baby was safe. She rewarded the huntsman handsomely for his help and made him promise never to speak of the matter again. The king never found out about the queen's dealings with Rumpelstiltskin, but often wondered at her great dislike for his fine cloth of gold cloak. Had she not spun the thread herself out of ordinary flax? And that is the end of the tale of Rumpelstiltskin. I love you. Bye-bye.